Today's sermon is a radio play entitled Go Down Moses. Who here is old enough to remember radio plays? Anyone? Okay, there's some of us, yes, me, yes. Well, basically a radio play is a performance that is just about the actors' voices. There are no costumes unless you need the costume to get you into character, and then that's fine. There's no makeup or props or sets. The actors read their parts and don't move around or do any pantomime or any theatrical business, like smoking cigarettes and stuff. The entire performance is in the actor's voice. I think the most famous radio play is Orson Welles' Halloween, War of the Worlds, which caused a panic on Halloween 1938 when some of the listening audience thought Martians were invading. I promise today that no Martians will show up. But boy, am I glad you all came today, because the surprise speaker that we've been talking about is you guys. I don't know if you noticed there was a thing that went out about a surprise speaker. Some of you saw it. Well, you guys are the surprise speaker. And I will give you more information about what you're going to do later on in the service. So please remember to put your phones on worship mode. And thank you once again. Welcome to Community UU Church. Could I have my actors come to the stage, please? He needs the costume to get into character. So we have Joyce Thompson as God. Yes. Jeff and Ouwerkerk as Pharaoh, as you can tell. And Patrick Bowler as Moses. Jeannette is our steadfast narrator. All right. Everyone have their script? All right. Our sermon today is a radio play about the exodus of the Hebrew people from Egypt. This is a story from the Unitarian Universalism's fourth source, Jewish and Christian teachings. I think most of you know the story of Moses, right? Do you? How the cruel Pharaoh, afraid of the Egyptians being outnumbered by the Hebrews, ordered the newborn male children of the Hebrew slaves to be killed. How Moses was saved by his clever mother, who placed him in a floating basket near where the Pharaoh's childless daughter bathed every day. You will remember that Pharaoh's daughter was delighted with baby Moses and adopted him. Moses was raised as a royal prince. You know the story, probably, of Moses flying into a rage when he saw an Egyptian beating a helpless Hebrew. He killed the Egyptian and had to flee Egypt in fear for his life. Perhaps you will also remember that Moses found shelter and a new life with Jethro's family and their flocks of sheep and goats. Our play begins when Moses has almost forgotten his former life as a prince and is only concerned with his wife, family, and flocks. So let's get ready to experience the story of Moses and the Exodus. It's all about the change in one man from a humble shepherd to a confident leader who is brave enough to speak truth to power. It's also the story of an enslaved people who made the transition to a mighty nation. As you listen and take part in the play, think about how everyone reacts to change. Pay attention to how people are transformed and how easy it is for people to go back to the way we've always done it. And yes, you did hear me correctly. I said take part. Remember, the congregation is a part of the play too. You're playing the Hebrew people. Your words will be on the screen from time to time. Please read your part with emotion. Also, between the acts of the play, there'll be something for you to sing. You'll be singing the chorus from the spiritual When Israel Was in Egypt Land. You know, it begins Go Down Moses. The words will be on the screen, and Elena will play this just before you sing. Then you sing. So this spiritual links the play to the story of two enslaved peoples, the Hebrew slaves and the American slaves who were torn from their homeland in Africa, who used the Bible story of Exodus to fuel their fight for freedom. I want you to feel expressive during the play. Feel free to boo Pharaoh, Just don't step on your fellow actors' lines. And now, let's listen in to Moses tending his flocks.
Today, I'll take the flock to the base of the holy mountain. I know there is some green pasture over there.
As Moses walked, he daydreamed, remembering how it was when he came to be in Midian, in the land of the Kenites. He vaguely recalled his childhood in the court of Egypt and his long-ago discovery that he was not Egyptian, but instead had been born to a Hebrew woman, one of the slaves who labored on the Pharaoh's pyramids. He remembered that awful day when he had killed an Egyptian soldier and then had run and run and run until he had came to this land. He wondered what had become of his people, still enslaved in the land of Egypt. He thought about how lucky he was to have escaped and come to Midian. He smiled as he remembered his wife and his 2 sons, and he thought about how contented he was to spend his days tending his father-in-law Jethro's flock. Soon Moses and the flock reached the base of the mountain, where they would surely find good pasture. As Moses walked, something caught his eye and pulled him abruptly from his reverie. A single bush was on fire, an odd occurrence. As Moses approached the bush, he heard a voice calling to him,
"Moses, Moses!"
Here I am.
And the voice ordered him to remove his sandals, for the place where he was standing was holy ground.
Who are you?
I am the God of your fathers, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have heard my people call out as they suffer in slavery. I want you to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go.
Who? Me? I can't do that. Why would they believe me? Whom shall I say sent me?
Tell them that I am sent you. I will give you a sign. Cast your staff upon the ground.
And when Moses threw his staff to the ground, it began to move. It became a snake.
Take the snake by the tail.
When Moses grabbed the snake, it became once more his staff. Convinced that the voice was indeed God's, a reluctant Moses pointed out that he was a poor choice to go and make demands of Pharaoh.
I have never been eloquent. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue.
Go and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Your brother Aaron can serve as a mouthpiece for you if you need help.
Will you please send someone else? There must be others who can do this.
Go and tell Pharaoh to let my people go.
And reluctantly, Moses made preparations to leave for Egypt. Part 2, Out of Egypt. Moses was glad to meet his brother Aaron on the edge of the wilderness outside of Egypt. Aaron told him of the difficulty the Hebrew people had had under the yoke of slavery. Moses told Aaron of the strange vision at the burning bush and of his understanding that he and Aaron were to go to Pharaoh and demand that he let the Hebrew people go. A few days later, Moses and Aaron stood before Pharaoh.
The God of our fathers demands that we hold a feast for him in the wilderness at a place 3 days' journey from here. If we do not go, then he has promised that terrible events will befall us, and also the people of Egypt.
Why do you want to take your people away from their work? They must not have enough to do.
Pharaoh ordered his taskmasters to force the Hebrews to find their own straw to make bricks. They were even forced to gather stubble for straw, doubling the work expected for them. The people came to Moses and Aaron to complain.
Why did you ever go and talk to Pharaoh? You have made things worse. He has doubled our work and increased our suffering.
And Moses told them of the freedom that awaited them, and they kept before them the hope and the vision of the land God had promised would be theirs. Again, God came to Moses and Aaron.
Go and tell Pharaoh to let my people go.
The people of Israel are not listening to me. Why would Pharaoh listen to a person like me?
When they went to Pharaoh, they showed him the many wonderful and terrible things that God could do. The waters of the Nile turned to blood. There was a plague of frogs in the land. Gnats invaded the land, and flies swarmed throughout Egypt.
Go and sacrifice to your God within the land of Egypt.
It would not be right for us to sacrifice within the land of Egypt. We must travel 3 days into the wilderness for our feast.
And God demanded again that Moses go to Pharaoh and tell him to let the people go. God threatened that a sickness would come upon the cattle and a pestilence upon the people of Egypt if Pharaoh did not let the Hebrews go. There would be thunder and lightning and hail that would ruin crops and cause famine in the land. And Pharaoh didn't listen, and these plagues came to pass. And when the hail came upon the land, Pharaoh said to Moses,
Go and sacrifice to your God, but take only your men, women and children and flocks and herds you must leave behind in Egypt.
We must go with our young and our old. We will go with our sons and daughters and with our flocks and herds, 3 days' journey into the wilderness to hold a feast for our God.
Pharaoh refused, driving Moses and Aaron from his presence. And when they went again to Pharaoh to demand that he let the people go, Moses and Aaron threatened that their God would bring a plague of locusts and a plague of darkness upon the land of Egypt. And so it was that the plague of locusts was followed by a plague of darkness. And Pharaoh called Moses in to him.
Go and sacrifice to your God. You may bring your men, women, and children, but your herds and flocks you must leave behind.
We must have animals to sacrifice. Not one hoof will we leave behind.
No, get out of here. If I ever see your face again, I will have you killed.
Moses spoke to the people of Egypt and not to Pharaoh when he told of the last plague to come. All of the firstborn in the land of Egypt would die if Pharaoh would not let the Hebrews go. Moses and Aaron called the people of Israel together and gave them instructions.
You shall slaughter a lamb and take some of the blood and put it on your door and your doorposts, so that the plague will pass over your abode.
And so it was that all the firstborn of the land of Egypt died that night, and all the firstborn of the Hebrews were spared. Pharaoh heard the great cry in all of Egypt. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the dead of night and told them to leave immediately with all of their people and all of their animals. And the people of Israel left so quickly that they could not allow their bread to rise. So they ate unleavened bread as they journeyed. When they reached the Red Sea, Pharaoh's army was in pursuit. As Pharaoh drew near, the people cried out to Moses,
Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us out to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us? Why didn't you leave well enough alone? In Egypt we would have lived, and here we will be slaughtered.
Fear not, stand firm.
Moses stretched out his staff over the waters of the Red Sea, and a great east wind blew, and the waters were divided. The people passed across the Red Sea on dry land, and when they reached the other side, they watched as the waters closed in, drowning Pharaoh's pursuing army. There was great celebration in the land, songs and dancing and the sound of tambourines. And the freed people prepared for their journey into the wilderness toward the land that God had promised them. Part 3, in the wilderness. The journey through the wilderness was difficult. Moses was called on to do many things, and he sought advice from God to figure out what to do. After 3 days' journey, the only water they could find was bitter and undrinkable. The people complained, demanding something to drink. Moses threw a piece of wood into the water, and it became sweet. The people drank eagerly and then continued their journey until they reached Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. Some weeks after leaving Egypt, after they departed Elim, they ran short of food. The people complained against Moses and Aaron.
If only we had died by the hand of God in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger.
And Moses told the people that God had promised manna would rain down from heaven in the night, and at daybreak they could gather and eat their fill. And so it was that manna, looking white like coriander seed, with a taste like that of wafers and honey, was found everywhere as the sun rose, and the people ate their fill, and continued to gather and eat manna each morning through their journey. And when they camped at Rephidim, there was again no water to drink, and the people became angry.
Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and livestock with thirst?
God, what shall I do? They are ready to stone me.
And God instructed him to take his staff, and in the presence of the elders to strike a rock. Moses did so, and water came out of the rock so the people could drink. The Amalekites who lived in the area did not want to share their water with this wandering people, and they attacked. Moses told his commander Joshua to choose some men to fight the Amalekites. They went out to fight, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur, one of the elders, went to the top of the hill. The battle unfolded before them. Whenever Moses lifted up his hand, Israel prevailed. Whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. When Moses grew too weary to hold his hand up any longer, they brought a stone and put it under him so he could sit. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and one on the other, so that he was steady until the sun set. Thus, Joshua and the Israelites defeated the Amalekites. And when they came to the land of Midian, where Moses' father-in-law, wife, and children were living, Moses told Jethro of all that had befallen since he had left Midian. Jethro observed that the people came to Moses with all their complaints and disputes, and that Moses worked to resolve every problem. Moses was exhausted. He had no time for his wife or his children. Jethro told Moses to delegate some of this work. He told him to choose trustworthy individuals to be judges and preside over the complaints and disputes of the people. Moses listened to his father-in-law and named some judges. And after that, the judges brought only the hard cases to Moses. The rest they decided themselves. Part 4, forming a new society. When they reached the foot of Mount Sinai, Moses summoned the elders and told them to instruct the people to wash their clothes and prepare for God to come 3 days hence.
Do not allow anyone to go up the mountain or to touch it.
On the third day, a thick cloud covered the mountain, and there was thunder and lightning and the blast of a trumpet. Moses and Aaron approached the mountain, covering their faces. The people were afraid. They stood at a distance. After a time, Moses journeyed alone to the top of the mountain, where he received from God 2 tablets containing the words of the covenant with Israel, the 10 Commandments. On the mountaintop, Moses received many instructions for forming a new society, including prescriptions for behavior, instructions for worship, and for the construction of a tabernacle, and for an ark to hold the tablets of the covenant. And he was gone from the people for a long time. Meanwhile, the people at the foot of the mountain grew anxious.
Who is this Moses anyway? And why has he been gone for so long? What of this God he keeps talking about and the promises of a new land?
They urge Aaron to do something to help them, to make for them a golden calf, that they might worship something familiar. Aaron was worried about the people and wanted to reassure them, so he gathered all of their gold jewelry and melted it down and created for them a golden calf to worship. As Moses came down from the mountain carrying the tablets with the covenant, he heard much singing and dancing, and he became concerned. He knew that the first thing written on those tablets was, "I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me." So, when Moses came upon the people worshiping the golden calf, singing and celebrating, he grew angry. He broke the tablets. He pulverized the golden calf and put the powder into water, which he made the people drink. And then he called out,
"Who is on the side of the Lord?"
Those who came to him he instructed to take their swords and to kill all those who had worshipped the golden calf, even brothers and cousins and other family members. 3,000 people died that day. Moses pitched a tent apart from the people outside the camp. There he withdrew to speak with God and to plead on behalf of the people. And after a time, God instructed Moses to once again journey up the mountain to meet God, once again to carve tablets onto which would be written instructions for a new society. And so Moses went up the mountain for a second time and received the words of the covenant on behalf of the people of Israel. And he came down from Mount Sinai much changed. He looked and sounded calm as he gathered the people around to tell them the laws for a new society. He instructed them on the roles they were to play, the ways they were to worship, the ways they were to behave with one another. He ordered the construction of the ark and the tabernacle according to the instructions he had received. And so it was that the Israelites went forth, carrying the Ark of the Covenant, journeying toward the promised land. But God told Moses that the people were not ready for a new land. They were to wander in the wilderness for 40 years until a generation had died. The next generation of Israelites would be the one to enter the promised land. Moses himself went to the mountaintop and saw the promised land, but did not enter it. He died there, and to this day, no one knows where he is buried.
I want to thank our actors and our narrator. And I also want to thank our booth staff, Mark Johnston and Jackson Boone. And our congregational administrator, John Elder, and our video editor, Chris Ronin. I gave them all a lot of extra work to do this week. So I hope they're not mad at me.